All right, let's do this. Peanut, if you're staying in the room, no talking. Hello, and welcome to the PhotoWork podcast, the talky and touchy-feely version of my book, PhotoWork, 40 Photographers in Process and Practice. I'm Sasha Wolf, and I'm joined as usual by my friend and producer, the Lewis to my Clark. Have I made that joke already?
Oh boy, I'd have to go back and listen.
Okay, so it's been basically a year. So it's been so long now that I could conceivably be... I mean, let's face it, I definitely tell the same stories.
We all do.
It's pathetic. But now I may be just making the same jokes. Oh, man. We need a research assistant to go back through the archives.
This is our 25th. Happy 25th.
Yeah, and happy 25th to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You are the best. I don't know why I just sang that.
I don't know why.
You are the best. All right, this is what we're going to do, because we could just talk for a long time about this and the year it's been, and we were sort of going to do that because we were going to handle it with questions that we asked people to send in, but then we had a little change of plans because the great photographer, curator, man about town, Paul Graham, agreed to be on the show. So he's our guest for today. So we're going to push back the original episode. I mean, who doesn't want Paul Graham on their 25th
That's right.
show? So
I think that is the 25 year anniversary gift, isn't it?
Yes, it is. You get a Paul Graham. You get a Paul Graham. Some people get paper, but you and I got a Paul Graham. So good for us. I always knew we were special.
Yes. So we'll do a little special back and forth for our next show.
Yes. All right. So let's get to it. So Paul came on because he's a good guy, and he's curated this fabulous show at the International Center of Photography. I've talked about it before on the show, and Paul came on to just discuss the exhibition in detail and sort of how it came to be and what it's about and what it means to him. And I think it's a great episode.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Of course, you talk about the show, this important show at ICP, which has been extended and you can still go see it. But you talk about the sort of underlying idea of the work being quotidian and no big theatrics and not award-winning press photography and the sort of underlying part of the show. But you have this other conversation about surviving purely on art and kind of the myth behind that, and that sort of actor's idea of once you've made it, then, you don't have to audition anymore, right? But even if you've had a good show and you've sold work, very few artists really purely survive on their artwork alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's great sort of hearing Paul talk about that. But yeah, we talk about a lot of interesting, really, we have a lot of great sort of digressions.
Mm-hmm.
And yep, so it's a great episode. I'm going to quickly, Paul wrote an essay for the MAC, published the catalog for the exhibition, which is called But Still It Turns. It's a beautiful book. If you can't make it in to see the show, if you can't get to the show, and even if you do get to the show, please buy this book. It's just so beautiful. And Paul wrote a lovely essay. I want to read a little bit from it. Each artist here works with scattered places and lives, earthly facts and chance collisions, history and its shadow, to form or echo some kind of interconnectedness. They refuse to yield to life's randomness, but struggle to give shape to the world, to straighten the disarray, to reveal the fine web that binds us to each other, to this time, to existence. Through photographs, the prism of time is illuminated and breaks to clarity. We see the components of how they fit together. They take us on unexpected paths. They bring us to other lives we could know if life turned another way. They foster empathy for our fellow citizens, for lives not our own. They allow us to recognize that life is not a story that flows to a neat finale. It warps and branches, spirals and twists, appearing and disappearing from our awareness. There is no didactic story here, no theme or artifice. None is asked, none is given. This photography is post-documentary, released from restricted briefs and reductive narrative, within which places and people are all too conveniently shuffled. Talented artists know when to leave the poetry of the world alone. No editorializing, no words to illustrate. That there is no singular story is the story. These photographers tell us that all is in play, that everything matters. Here is a freedom, hard won, sometimes confusing, but nonetheless genuine. A consciousness of life and its song. I love that. Thank you, Paul, for those beautiful words. I know we haven't mentioned the 9 artists who are in the show yet. Paul will talk about that. It takes a little while till we get to that, but we will get to that, and then we will discuss each artist. So anyway, without further ado, Michael, if you don't mind, please take it away.
My pleasure, and here's your conversation with Paul Graham.
Paul Graham, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you.
For our viewers, I always do that. For our listeners, you and I today are going to talk about this wonderful show that you curated called But Still It Turns at the International Center of Photography. We're not going to spend this time talking about your career as an artist, and people can send hate mail to you, but we will pick that up another time. You and I are going to have that talk at another date. But you've curated this really, in my opinion, extraordinary, important show that I just really love. And I think that the timing was definitely challenging because it opened while we were still in pretty difficult times with the pandemic. And so, I want to make sure more people get down there and see the show, as do you. And so we want to devote this episode of the podcast to talking about it, why you did it, what it's about, and hopefully get people really, interested. So why don't we start, if you could, tell folks what the genesis was, what the show is. Why don't you start with that, and then how it came to be?
Thanks, Sasha. It's called But Still It Turns, which comes from Galileo. It's obviously in Italian. He allegedly said this when he was released from the Inquisition because the Catholic Church didn't like his ideas that the Earth revolved around the sun rather than the other way around. They wanted it to be, centered on them on Earth. Rather than heliocentric around the sun. And he was forced to recant it under pain of torture. And apparently as he left the Inquisition, he tapped his foot on the floor and mumbled under his breath in Italian. I'm not going to say it, butcher Italian by saying it, but one translation of it is, But Still It Turns. Which was a perfect title for, my observations I trust my observations of life rather than what the orthodoxy is. How did it come about? It came about from a sort of, gentle frustration at the direction, the way that so much of the powerful photography that I love, photography that engage with life, where photographers struggle to sort of show the forces that move and shape our lives, was sort of being overlooked or marginalized or misunderstood by the art world. And by the museums, sometimes, and that I was feeling sort of a little frustrated at that. Is like, why don't people get this? Why don't people get the core of the medium and what is most powerful and unique about it? Why they want it to be like painting or be like performance? So it started out a long discussion. I think I expressed that frustration in that. in a MoMA forum where I was asked to give a presentation. Oh God, it must be 10 years ago now, where I wrote that piece.
2010, I think.
All right, so 11 years now. Yeah, called The Unreasonable Apple, which was a sort of cri de coeur, in defense of photography from the world.
And Paul, if I can just jump in here for a second, the reason I know it's 2010 is because I have this piece of writing of yours always with me, because it's sort of in my arsenal of great writing in defense of the type of photography that you and I both love. And so it actually came up, Sarah Meister mentioned it in the last podcast. I really hope and recommend that everyone go out and find this, The Unreasonable Apple by Paul Graham. Anyway, go on.
I think actually it was, quite honestly, I think historically I think it's supposed to be The Unreasonable Potato. because it's about the potato and the apple, and the potato came from the New World and was brought back to Europe, and people didn't know what to do with potatoes at the time. The apple tree always existed in Europe. I believe it's that way around, but I remember when I was trying to research it and I was writing it, I was Googling The Unreasonable Apple, trying to find this apocryphal tale. It begins with this story about people bringing back an apple, and people who ate potatoes, didn't know what to do with it because it didn't, they couldn't cook it the same way that they did with their potatoes. But actually, I think it's supposed to be the other way around. The potato arrived from the New World, and they tried to treat it like an apple. But when I was Googling and researching the story, I was Googling unreasonable and apple, and all I got was pages and pages of Google results about people complaining about their Apple iMac or computer, about how they couldn't get it repaired, and how unreasonable Apple Corp was.
People are still complaining about that, by the way.
Right. So I never got anywhere, and I just decided I'd rather have photography as an apple than a potato. So I used that.
That's right.
So I used that one, but I think it should technically be the other way around. But never mind. I've digressed massively here.
Yeah, it's now in history as The Unreasonable Apple.
Right. So yeah, that was a piece I wrote then, and that sort of premise carried forward. And I remember, discussing with. I was represented for a long time by Pace McGill Gallery, which is sadly defunct now. And I remember discussing with Peter McGill there how I'd love to do a summer show with him. And, one time and put in other artists' work, to show some of the work I loved. And it never happened. I said I want to have one of the bigger Pace, they're aligned with Pace Gallery. And I would love one of the bigger spaces for summer to do this. It never happened, but he said, let me introduce you to this man, Tom, who he also feels the same. And we talked about that. And long story short, met with him, met with Tom. There was a groundswell of people who were getting a little disaffected with what was being shown in the galleries, what was being shown in the museums too, some of the shows that, you'd go to the Whitney or some of the MoMA new photography shows and find very little photography from the world. Maybe out of 8 photographers, there'd be one person who actually went out and took pictures. Mm-hmm. And people were, I remember the New Yorker making a very grumbling, Vince Aletti making a very unhappy review of a MoMA show, for the same reason. And, so, we thought we should make an exhibition, just put our money where our mouth is, as they say, and make an exhibition that it's not anti anything, but it's about just sort of nudge the pendulum back a bit towards the core of the medium, the heart of the medium. Photography that engages with life, that, photography goes out and dances with life as it comes at them to create something. And, that's where the premise started with that. And we discussed it with many people, with Sarah Meister, who you mentioned, with yourself, I believe. Didn't we, Sasha? Didn't we meet and discuss it early?
We did. We had a few years ago, sat around the table and brainstormed. Mm-hmm. It was for me, it was, really wonderful. I like yourself, it's, we look for our, your team, your people who feel the way you do. And, the idea that there was this core group of people who wanting to really not just complain, but try and figure out what could we do to promote the type of work we love was very exciting.
Yeah. I mean, we have to get this in there, that this isn't an anti-anything. You can have many different types of art. You can have many different types of photographic art.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was just more that the core of the medium had sort of got marginalized, that things got skewed, that the pendulum had swung way over to one extreme. And that,
Yeah, this didn't come from an angry place. This is just, wanting to celebrate what you love. That doesn't mean to diminish anyone or anything else.
No, exactly.
But, I love the New York Yankees, and, that doesn't mean I hate the Mets.
Oh.
Well, maybe it does. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, so, you realize also, I go to, or used to pre-pandemic, go to an awful lot of galleries, and I would see, a lot of art and photographic art, and you see the very partial embrace that the art world took of photography, that it in the art world understands synthesizing a work of art, something that is made, that is constructed, that is, whether it's theoretically constructed or physically, literally constructed, or digitally constructed. They understand that. But something where a photographer simply, in quotation marks, simply goes out in the world and takes a picture of life as it was, they struggle with. It appears to just be a sort of lucky observation,
Yep. The camera's doing the work.
Camera's doing the work. Oh, what a fortuitous moment that they uncovered there. Or what, and they don't really appreciate what the nature of the artistry in that, and which is heartbreaking, because the greatest works of art in the whole medium of photography, from Robert Frank's The Americans to Bill Eggleston to Walker Evans, have been in precisely this area. To Helen Levitt, Lisette Modell, Diane Arbus. It's and to overlook that and to say we only see it in terms of synthetic artistic creation. So is to abandon the what is unique and special about this medium. So anyway, I'm sounding like some preacher now. Sorry.
No, we like it. Preach.
So we just wanted to hey, let's just see if we can make an exhibition that shows some good examples of people, because people are out there working. You could find this work if you cared. You could find it especially in books, in publications. The vibrancy of the photo book. You could find this work. You could see it, and let's try and create an exhibition that would nudge the pendulum back a little bit, just sort of steer the ship back a little bit. And yeah, that's what we set out to do. But it's hard. You're trying to be a guest curator. You're trying to go to a institution, an established institution, to get a platform in that way and say, hey, can I take the fun bit of your job away, curator? Of making the show, can I take the fun bit and you assist me in putting this on? So it was hard.
And also museums plan years out, right? So that's just the logistics of it are very difficult.
Yeah. And then we lucked out that when we did talk to quite a few people, but when ICP was in a process of reinvention. They were they were upgrading their premises, and for anyone who's confused, who doesn't know, ICP has this wonderful new premises on Essex Street. They're no longer in Midtown. They're no longer on the Bowery. They've been a bit peripatetic, but they are now in a beautiful new premises on Essex Street. And it's pretty spectacular in there. It's worth the
wonderful
visit. It's what they should have had a long time ago, but I'm so happy for them.
Yep.
And of course they opened they embraced the show, and they saw it through. It was meant to happen last September, but then a certain virus escaped, and everything shut down, and it opened finally this February. And they've extended it now. It's on till mid-August for anyone doesn't know it.
Yeah, and that's really important to say. It's been extended. So I want people to, make a trip to the city, not just people who are here. I think it's such a wonderful show, such an important show. It's so rich and fulfilling. I've sent many people who are not in the photo world. I do know some people who are not in the photo world, and I've sent them down there, and they have had the most incredible experience. They've been extremely moved. They've been perplexed at times, but in a way that they could manage, which I really love. So if some of the work was challenging for them, they stuck it out and figured it out, like one does with a difficult poem. You read a beautiful poem and you're not sure, you have a feeling, you're even moved, you may not know why, but you decide to dig in and it all starts to make sense. And I feel that I've heard that from many non-photo people that I've sent. And I've actually wound up having these incredible conversations that have been really powerful for me.
Great.
As I said, particularly with non-photo people. So that's
great.
A real mark of a successful show to me, that although it's extremely challenging, which we want, it's accessible. And it is so thoughtful and coherent that the work you do, if you don't totally understand the language, the work will pay off. And what a great triumph. So I'm
I'm happy for
admiring of what you did.
Thank you, but really, it's let's give credit to the artists. All I did was gather together these artists, and it's really them that deserves the credit and thanks. I mean,
well, they're beautifully informing each other. So I think you've put together a really wonderful group. So why don't you tell folks about who's in the show?
Yeah, I was realizing that we haven't actually. I mean, the boundaries we set just to be established. The other person we should mention a lot is Diane Dufour of Le Bal in Paris was a consultant on this, and she was very good when she could come to New York. She was very good in helping us get through this and navigate it. And Michael Mack, of course, of Mack Books, who published the book. Both of those were very...
the book it's wonderful.
Yeah, for anyone who can't, obviously, a lot of people can't get to New York City. The book is there. So the parameters we decided to set was simply, how the world is a huge place and we'll just become, the whole show become baggy and, dissipated. But to keep a focus on it, we decided to stick to work made in the United States this century. So work that's made in the last 20 years in the USA. It didn't have to be an American photographer, and a few of them aren't. 3 or 4 people are not American citizens, but made work here. And it's, at the end of the day, we would love to have included 30, 40, 50 artists in this, but the show would have then ended up with 3 pictures each, which is just ridiculous. Mm-hmm. So we kept the number to under 10. It's actually 9 photographers, of which 1 is a collaboration. The 2 Italian guys, Emanuele Bruti and Pier Giorgio Cassotti, collaborated together with Index G, their work there. And 9 photographers, which is, I just mentioned the 2 Italians, Richard Choi, Gregory Halpern, Karen Hatleyberg, Christine Potter, Ramel Ross, Vanessa Winship, and Stanley Wolaka-Wanambwa. So so 8 bodies of work, 9 artists, which meant they got a fair space each. Wouldn't you agree, Sasha? They all got
absolutely,
a fair little area exhibition to themselves where you could show their bodies of work with its own, independent dignity, as it were, their own privileged space. We got the whole of ICP, which was another benefit of the shutdown, the pandemic, because there was going to be another show upstairs, but they couldn't do that. So we managed to expand. Work made in the United States this century. And of course, I hope this goes without saying from what we were saying before, it had to be work made out in the world. Nothing synthesized in the computer, nothing made in the studio. and nothing staged, which got me in trouble because some photographers said, hey, wait, you say nothing staged here, but what of course mean is nothing, no big Hollywood production.
Right.
No big, lighting crew and
no Gregory Crutzen type
which is good work. Or Jeff Wall, that's good
work. We're
work.
not knocking, right?
Not knocking. No.
We're not.
That's good.
No.
I love Greg. I love Wall. There's nothing there. But
that's not what this is. That's all.
Exactly.
That's not what this show is.
But equally, some photographers say, hey, you do say to someone, hey, could you stand back there? Could you, hold your hand? I saw you put your hand up. Could you put it back up again and point? That they're saying, well, is that staging? I guess so. Photographers have always done that. Photographers have always.
Well, anytime you're using a large format camera, a camera on a tripod, it's not a snapshot. So if you're taking a photograph of a person, they have to cooperate. So that's just a given. And again, this may be one of these things that you only know if you're sort of in the photo world. But if you are in the photo world, you understand that. You understand that there's a certain amount of anywhere from cooperation to collaboration when you're doing this type of work, right? I mean, I think of someone like Doug Dubois and My Last Day at 17, which is, as listeners of this podcast know, one of my favorite bodies of work. And, there's a lot of collaboration there, but I think still the work falls under the umbrella of the type of work we're talking about here. So, and then of course it could be much more subtle and lean more towards the spontaneous. So, there's room there. There's some breadth there under that heading.
Right. And, I have to say we had a long list of, must have been like 35 artists who we were considering. There's probably some people listening in who are thinking, why aren't I in that show? I should be in that show. My work fits in, And
I can assure you there are some people listening who are thinking that.
And I agree with them. They should be. There's a lot. There's 30 other people who should be in this show. But like I said, we simply couldn't do it. You can't do that.
I actually represent some of them.
I'm sorry. I apologize to everyone.
No, you should apologize to me because I have to hear about it.
I'm sorry, Sasha. I'm sorry to the artist. The best thing the only, acknowledgement that we could do was in the back of the book, we put 30 illustrated bibliography, 30 other books in there and said, hey, check these out. Here's other work from...
I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, so here's some books from 2000 that everyone will know. Is everything from Mark Steinmetz, up to something that's like a little zine that probably only was 25 copies of, a zine. Mm-hmm. So trying to... something that's in its third edition, to something that no one will have heard of or few people heard of. So we're trying to acknowledge it. And in the exhibition, we have vitrines in the exhibition with some of these same books in it, as many as we could get in there, to acknowledge, there is more to it. There is a great groundswell. There's a great ocean of other work out there that is important. And, in the hope that, sorry to speak in cliches here, but the a rising tide carries all ships and lifts everyone up.
Let me ask you, just really quickly, because you mentioned Steinmetz, did you think that you also wanted to sort of focus on people who maybe not were as well known or are as well known as someone like Mark? Was that
Mark and
a
bit, I mean, then you go with bizarre things like Vanessa Winship is reasonably well known in Europe, but is comparatively not here.
That's right.
And people are astounded to realize that she doesn't have any gallery representation in the USA and is never, She Dances and Jackson has never been shown here in its own show. So we were we were so lucky, terrible, bad for Vanessa, but we were lucky to be able to do that, to present unseen, very powerful work that's only seen as a book, really, in the USA.
Yep.
And Mark, I mean, there was people like Mark, and even to some degree, someone like Judith Joy Ross, who you feel that she and Mark are both well known in the US, but undervalued, by the art world. I think Judith doesn't have any gallery representation in the US, as far as I know, anymore, which is ridiculous,
Well, these people don't have gallery representation because the type of work they're making is very hard to sell. And I'm going to refrain from taking us down that road, because it'll just be me giving a lesson to the listeners on why that is. And I think I've covered that in other podcasts. But, it's really that simple. That work is very hard to sell to individual collectors. And so, there's just not that many photo-only galleries. They would wind up, 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, they'd be in photo galleries. But, I started noticing around 2009 or 10 that, I think only one or two photo galleries opened after I did in 2007. They just started to vanish, so...
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, Sasha. It's hard. Conundrum. It's hard from your end. It's hard from the artist's end. It's... Making a living is tough. As an artist or as an art dealer, it's hard, It's not a good get-rich-quick scheme, especially if you're in the photography world. And that also, of course, has to do with multiples. So that's another difficulty. Right.
The art world doesn't understand or like multiples.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to digress too much, but people seem to assume that... I mean, I'm relatively fortunate. It's still a struggle every year in, year out to pay the mortgage and put food on the table. But, people assume that you reach a certain level and you're just, raking in an annual salary, But to get the equivalent of a tenured professor teaching position, when you add in all those benefits that they have with their healthcare, with their matching pension contribution, with the job security, with the sabbaticals, you have to be doing incredibly well as an artist, to be making, I don't know, pulling in $100,000 a year. It's that means, by the time the gallery's taken its cut, you've got to be selling $200,000 a year, which is basically selling close to $20,000 a month. I don't want to get, I don't want to do a math lesson here, but it's hard.
I think it's important. It's very hard. People don't realize how hard it is. And I always tell young artists that they really need to have a job, and often they'll throw up names. Well, what about this person or what about that person? And I say, well, just because you can name 5 or 10 photographers who you think are making a living selling work, first of all, doesn't mean they are. And secondly, there's millions of people trying to make a living as an artist. So the fact that you can, name 10 who you think are is a terrible ratio. So, there's just a ton of options out there. I deal with this all the time with clients. The amount of options they have is staggering. And, whenever I make a sale, I try and express, particularly to institutions, when I'm dealing with curators, my expression to them of appreciation for their time and consideration of the work, I try and phrase it in a way that it doesn't sound like just a tagline, like that they understand that it is really genuine, because I know how many options they have. And so that they've decided to spend some of the museum budget on one of my artists is really... It always feels unbelievable, frankly. And I'm lucky that more and more it happens regularly. But it's a real honor, and it is really tough. And as you said, whether it's Mark or Judith Joy Ross, or Mark has representation here, but Vanessa, as you mentioned, it's very, very difficult to put all those pieces together. And that's why it's best not to focus on the financial part. Just make your work and get on with it.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. Right? The numbers of the market are a difficult thing, and then we haven't even touched upon the fact you might hit a purple patch and everyone wants your work, and then you think this is great, and then 3 years later they've all got that, and they're not interested for you got to wait at least a decade before your turn comes around again.
That's right. Well, that's because there's not a lot of collectors. So...
Yeah, and fair enough. Everyone deserves a turn. They should be looking at other artists' work and doing that. But at the same time, it's tough when someone's taken on a studio or whatever. This is not me, because I don't do that sort of thing. But taking on a studio or a big mortgage or some huge project, and they've got to fund it. So it's and they assumed they were going to make the same money next year as they made it last year, and it doesn't work that way.
Right, that's right.
Pandemics come along and stuff like that. Anyway, we've got off the subject. Do you want me to go through some of the artists involved a bit more detail?
Yes, please. I would love that.
So we looked at the long list we had and the work we had together with Deanne and Tom, and we went through the list of potential artists we had, and you edit it down for various reasons. You also where the work is geographically, the nature of the work. You don't want everything to end up in black and white or everything to end up in color, conversely,
Right.
Or, So the two Italian I mentioned, the Bruti Cassotti dialogue, which I've never understood how photographers collaborate. I haven't met them actually, but I'd love to meet them and actually understand how that works, because at the end of the day, just one person takes a picture, surely. But who worked in St. Louis with their wonderful work, Index G, which is a fantastic book if anyone hasn't seen it.
It is wonderful. It is wonderful. I didn't know them, so this was a real joy for me to see that work. And,
lovely book. There was a third wheel, was a I don't know her name and it isn't written here, is the woman designer who designed the book and helped them with the installation of their exhibition, the design of their exhibition, which is very novel with these twin.
Did Morgan design?
Morgan designed our book, but the Cassotti Bruti Index G
their
book.
Right. Okay. Yes, of course.
Their book is a Italian woman designer who's clearly very, very talented, as is Morgan. And I just want to acknowledge her part of the work.
That's good of you. Yep.
And I found that book in Arles, in one of the festivals in Arles there, and it's the way. Actually, to be honest, the way I did most of the research was through going to New York Art Book Fair. Besides asking people like yourself, like Sarah, like Michael Mack, like anyone, give me names, like Greg Harris, who I believe who you've had here, haven't you?
Love Greg.
Yes. Yep. Tell me anyone you think I should have. Tell me any name. Make suggestions. Give me anyone overlooked. Yep. And going to book fairs, photography book fairs. New York Art Book Fair is great for that. That's how I discovered Zora Murph, who. By the by, I wanted to be in the show, but he got offered to be in the MoMA show, and so which was going to be on at the same time. So of course he took MoMA, as anyone would, and then of course the MoMA show didn't actually happen.
But good news is Zora's doing quite well.
Zora's doing great, and he is great, and he's doing great, and but that's how I discovered him. No one told me about Zora. I just found the early books. His thin little books at New York Art Book Fair, and thought, oh my God, who's this guy and why has no one told me about him? And immediately, wrote to him via the publisher. Anyway, so Bruti Cassotti with their wonderful Index G work. Then, they did basically about the redlining, if that's the right word, of the economic division of St. Louis, where one side of the road was wealthy, white, long life expectancy, high annual income. Other side of the road was minorities, mostly black, much lower income, much worse health, worse life expectancy. And they did these portraits, landscapes, driving down, I think it's called Del Mar Boulevard, driving down there. There's actually even a sort of lump of earth, a big sort of earth mound at the end, which is a low-level radioactive dump, believe it or not. So shades of Flint, with its poisoned water there, which, of course, guess whose side of the tracks that's on.
Right, always.
Just to complete the list, Richard Choi, wonderful artist who makes this work. This is the hardest work to describe to put in the book, because there's very short videos of these moments where he meets people. There's a mother with her children praying. There's someone doing some sketching. There's a woman winding the clock. There's a man laying on a bed with his cat playing a penny flute or whistle or something. And while he's doing this short 30-second, 20, 30, 40-second video, he takes a picture on the same video camera. It isn't a frame grab out of the picture. It's a camera where you can press the other button and interrupt the flow and take a picture. So the work ends up being beautifully about the flow of time and pulling a photograph out of the flow, which is, of course, what we all do. And it makes it as clear as day that this is how photography works, this stuttering interruption of life. And there are 6 videos down a long gallery that you see these videos presented with the still photograph right beside them, same size.
Yeah, they're very moving. There's some sort of very quotidian moments that wind up just being these sort of gut punches, and you have to sort of, well, you don't have to, but you presented with an opportunity to really meditate on why it feels so stirring.
Yeah.
That was my experience.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing, throughout almost the entire show, there's almost nothing that is, most of the work is fairly about quotidian life, it's about everyday things. There's no award-winning photography, if you know what I mean, in quotation marks. There's nothing that would win the Sony Press Photo Prize, which is another ballpark, you know. There's very little drama or action or remarkable.
Theatrics.
It's none of that going on in any of this. It's quiet quotidian life, but still pulling something profoundly meaningful from that, which is what 99% of our life is about. You know, our life is made up of that stuff. And for someone to speak eloquently and meaningfully about that 99% is far more valuable than someone who's photographed, I don't know, car crashes and buildings on fire and stuff like that, you know. Anyway, digressed again, got off topic. Then the great Greg Halper.
Digressions are where all the good stuff happens, by the way. So digress away.
Greg Halpern, third photographer, third body of work to mention, with Zizix, which is a little older now. He's done some other work since then, which is great. Where he, you know, I'm butchering everyone's projects here by giving thumbnail, you know, back of an envelope descriptions of them, but you know, where he this town out in the Californian desert where he photographed, you know, the people he encountered there on many visits, as far as I know. Wonderful photography, you know. I am envious of his ability to navigate people and places and get people to collaborate with him in embracing him taking a picture. You know, we've all seen people in the street where I'd love to get their photograph, but you're too embarrassed, or you know you don't have the skill set to ask them, and Greg just has that in spades. I don't know how he does it.
Well, I'm not going to say you don't, but I will say that, you know, knowing Greg, he's, you know, as he's very warm. He's a very warm and sort of genuine person, and I think that really has helped him in those interactions. Yeah,
and I think you could say the same of two of the other, of Vanessa Winship, who we've mentioned already, and of Karen Halleberg, you know, who same thing, you know, and I feel that we're touching on a part of the artist's skill set, and a part of the art itself is this performative ability to navigate people and relationships with the world into their art, to bring that in. It's almost like a piece of performance art where they manage to get complete strangers to collaborate and engage with them and agree and permit, you know, and gift their image to the world, you know, not just the photographer, but the portrayed person. You know, and they managed to do that. And that is part of these artists' skills, you know, the ability to do it.
Absolutely.
And, you know, get people to agree. And it's not tricking them, you know, it's not about tricking them or manipulating them. It's an engagement with them, with who they are. And the warmth and empathy and trust that you see in Vanessa or in Karen. You know, Halleberg, he's here with Lost Coast, one of his earliest pieces of work, where he's in Eureka, Oregon, I believe it is, where he photographs, you know, post-industrial, if you can call that ever in Oregon, you know, town, the life there. I'm so covetous of his ability to choreograph large groups of people into arrangements, you know, there around the frame and through it. A wonderful one of families and puppies and children and people carrying stuff. I think there's a little bit of, you know, they all know he's taking pictures. It does have the feeling of fly on the wall, but these people know and trust Karen and are allowing and engaging in the photograph. That's beautiful work, you know, and
I agree.
I think I saw it. I knew Karen from my days at Yale. But
Right.
I saw the work really with the Lost Coast book that TBW published, again, a photography book. And I think it's being republished maybe later this year, but obviously a good selection's in this. Vanessa Winship, who we mentioned, she dances on Jackson. Spectacular book, came out about, what was that, 8 years ago, something like that, I'm guessing. Beautiful book where she traveled across America with her partner, George Giorgio, also a great photographer, and photographed there the people she met, the empathy she has. Much more classic, large format, black and white.
Yep.
You get the feeling, this is a view camera. People are standing, agreeing to have a picture taken, but there's obviously there's still landscapes, cityscapes are in there, still lives of things, even some wildlife. There's some deer in some pictures. Beautiful, radiant empathy of her pictures. It's just so beautiful to witness that Buddhist-like generosity to humanity in her work.
Yeah.
It's a compelling lesson to all of us
Yep.
in terms of being empathic to other people.
Yeah, open to other people, absolutely.
And their lives and their situation. The father and son who are in their, I think it's their wedding clothes or whatever. And
It's so moving. It's a great photograph.
Yeah, the young couple, who are in love meeting there. And she did these beautiful arrangements in the pictures that in the exhibition, which is all her, really. Christine Potter, Manifest, out on the western slopes of the Colorado, the sort of, I always keep calling it high desert, but I don't know is that right, Sasha? Is Colorado high desert, or is that more south?
I don't know.
I mean, it certainly looks like deserty from the pictures. It looks there's no trees to speak of, very dry. She talks about, she engages with the paradigm or the myth of manifest destiny, what that means for the West, hence the title Manifest of her body work. Also a book by TBW, another way I found the work. Black and white, usually, these drifting men. I don't want it to be pejorative and say lost souls, something like that. And the desert itself.
Yeah, there's a real pathos to that.
Yeah.
To those guys, yeah.
Yeah. Stanley, very interesting artist, who I knew very distantly from England, but he now lives in the States, and he's a professor at RISD, I believe now, who blends in his own he's the one person who does blend in his own photographs with found or vernacular photography. That I think he buys them on eBay, pictures, where historical press pictures and with loaded imagery, shall we say. There's a white Nazi bodybuilder giving a Nazi salute, which is clearly vintage, but I don't know how vintage it is. I don't know if it's from the 1930s, 40s, or whether it's more modern than that. I should ask him, actually.
It's a tough image.
Yeah, it is. It's a hard one to take high up on the wall. With his own pictures, with his it's easy to overlook. Stanley's a very good photographer himself, with
absolutely.
some beautiful portraits of quite tender of a young man in a doorway and stuff like that. He did, and again from books, his beautiful book, One Wall of Web, All My Gone Life, and it's a sort of double book. It sort of works weaves in two different branches. Quickly to wrap things up, Rommel Ross, wonderful artist, photographer, filmmaker, who I believe works and has certainly have a teaching position down in South in Hale County. Interesting enough, where many photographers have worked, have worked in the same area. And he's been there for 10 or 11 years now. And it's tempting to use the term is embedded in the community there, but that implies it's a project that he's snuck his way in, and that isn't the case. He's deeply committed to what happens there. And of course, famously, what I'm not mentioning is he made this movie, Hale County this evening, which is a transcendently moving scrapbook of imagery put together of life over a couple of years in that community down there, and was Oscar nominated, unbelievably, as best documentary in 2019, which is an experience that not many photographers expect to come across, but that's great, how it expands things. And that's being shown.
And it's in the exhibition. So it's you can watch the film. His photographs are up, so you can look at his photographs and then sit down. And so I actually recommend that people really plan when they do go to see this show, and they better, God damn it, but that they, make enough time to also sit and watch Ramel's wonderful, really moving film.
Yeah. It got the sort of review in the New Yorker that you would just like, okay, I'm done. Just like it got that sort of review that we all do, everyone dreams of as an artist. It's like this has moved the paradigm, shifted the paradigm of everyone. It's like, okay, and I can retire now. But of course he couldn't. He's only in his 30s, whatever. But what's lovely is his still photographs, which haven't really been seen at all. Very powerful in themselves, obviously.
I agree. I think they're fantastic.
Yeah, and an interesting thing is his still photography is done with the most archaic, 8x10 color, largest of of the commercially available large formats, very ponderous, slow way of working, slowing time down. So he's using that extreme classic large format photography for the photographs, but the videos, of course, it's something that's only capable now, where someone can shoot this handheld digital video. I don't know if it's on an iPhone. I don't think it is, but so he's using the latest digital technology on the one hand, but on the other hand, he's using the most archaic, classic form of photography for his still work.
Yeah, you see, you can have it all. Yeah,
you can have it all. Yeah. I think is that all 8? Did I mention? So Vanessa, Stanley. Yeah, I think I've gone.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's everyone. I'd like I said before, to repeat it again, I'd love it if there'd been 25 people, but unless someone's going to give me the entire floor of MoMA, the expanded MoMA.
MoMA, if you're listening, yeah. I would also like to say, Ramel Ross, if you're listening, please email me, because I would love to have you on the podcast. But he's a tough one to get a hold of. I've tried. I'll just
I love it. Yeah, same for me too. I thought he wasn't going to be in the show, but then he steps up to the plate at the last minute. But I love that about him. He treats an email like you've written him a letter, and he'll reply in a few weeks, maybe.
Yeah.
It's great. It's so refreshing that somewhere in this perpetually, always on, always connected world, someone is like, yep, thanks, I'll get back to you when I'm ready. I love that.
Yep.
And why not? He's got other things going on.
I agree. Yes.
So you heard Sasha say she agrees there, Ramel, so you've got another couple of weeks.
Although I think, anyway, yeah, we'll give him a couple of weeks. Give him another couple of weeks. So before we wrap up, is there anything that we now have the sound? Unfortunately, my microphone is going to be picking up the sound of Peanut drinking water. Peanut, lie down. Okay. Oh my God. She always needs to make some sort of appearance in the podcast. So, yeah, is there anything else that we want to say about the show other than?
Obviously, you have a global reach. You're going through the ether. This podcast goes through the ether to everybody, and people are thinking, well, that's great that I don't live in New York and I can't get to New York. So to reinforce the book, Michael Mack of Mac Books, the legendary Mac Books, stepped up to the plate on this and published the book in the pandemic, with beautifully designed by Morgan Crawcroft Brown, his designer there. Print. So that was a real effort to make this, to push this over the line.
It's a beautiful book. I think the book is very special. I mean, I think I've communicated that to Morgan as well, that I really think it's a book that everyone who has a photo book collection should have on its own. I agree, whether you see the show or not. It's not just a show catalog. It's something more. And I would also just say, though, that I believe it's worth, if you don't live in New York, come into New York, come on in. Dawood Bey is now up at the Whitney Museum.
Yeah,
there's a million other great things to do, but you could do a double header of Dawood Bey and the show at ICP that we've been talking about, and what a fantastic trip that would be.
I agree. I mean, I had the press for But Still It Turns was, a while ago, and but I had a journalist recently reach out to me who had made her first trip into the city and she was really moved by the show. And I think because of the artist's work, because of what it is, but also because it shows you a time from before the pandemic when people mingled, when people were maskless, when people were intimate, when people were relaxed. And it's uplifting because of that, because you realize this life was like this and life will be like this again. And this woman was almost in tears talking to me about it, how much it meant to see what these artists had done and their engagement of Curran and Vanessa and Ramel with other people, with strangers, the lack of fear about a virus or about a disease, and intimacy of, people putting their arms around each other. And that's uplifting for the soul. It's nourishing. Absolutely.
Yep. Can I ask you, actually, it just occurred to me before we wrap up, has this been for you a particularly important experience for you in the sort of all the things you've done in the art world? Does this rank? Is this something that has given you a lot of joy and that you'll reflect on?
I mean, of course, yeah. It's good to do it. It's good to gift back. It's about gifting back, nudging the pendulum, as we said earlier, a little bit back in the direction that you care and love. So yeah, that was good. I mean, there's a bit. Do you know the phrase? You don't want to know how the sausage is made.
Yeah, of course.
Where suddenly it's like, okay, now you see the other side of making an exhibition, of the dealing with other artists' frames and what they want and how they want to lay their work out, or printing this way or that way, or on this paper or that paper, and then just the logistics of trying to navigate and fit all that into a budget. However generously we were supported, it all has to work out. So it was. I've always been the selfish one who's pushing for this type of print or that type of frame, and then suddenly like, oh, so that's what it's like for people.
Right.
When as you will know, Sasha, when someone's like, I want my work framed this way, can you pay for it, please?
I do know. Yes, I do know.
So yeah, but it's great. It's been great to help other people. The show isn't about me or my work. It's about other people and work I care about, and for the most part, a younger generation to pass the torch a bit.
Well, I think it's just incredible, successful as far as concept and execution, and most importantly, incredibly moving contributions. So whether you fully realize it or not, and my guess is that after your bruises heal of the logistics part of it, and I am very familiar with those bruises, once they heal and you can really just feel, sort of connected to the work itself, you'll realize what a wonderful contribution this was to the world that we care about so much. So thank you for that, and thank you for spending time today with me talking about it. And I won't harangue you, but I'll do some light pestering down the road to have you back on to talk about your work, and I'll look forward to that. But thank you so much, Paul.
Okay. Thank you, Sasha. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
PhotoWork with Sasha Wolf is produced by me, Michael Chauvin-Dalton of Real Photo Show. The executive producer is Sasha Wolf, and our theme music is by J. Walter Hawks. You can hear PhotoWork on all your favorite podcast platforms. Please rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Spotify, and be sure to subscribe on any one of those services or wherever you listen to podcasts.